And we are live. Hi, everyone. Welcome to What's Politicking You Off. My name is Longhair Linda.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Lance.
Nice. Okay. So thank you so much. This is now episode 3. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you tuned in to 1 and 2, you pretty much have a good idea of what this is going to be. We basically just have a look at the news. We have a look at what's going on in the world, where it's kind of politics related, even though it feels like pretty much everything is politics related these days. And just kind of pick out the big stories, the things that we should watch out for, and have our little rants about it on a Saturday afternoon. Pretty much that's what this show is. So what we're going to do, we're going to kick off with some of the hot topics that we've seen. So starting off with, because these are the times, COVID. Did you guys hear about the COVID vaccine passports that are now being trialed here in the UK? You seen anything about it? What are your thoughts?
Seen, thought, opinion changed. Like when it was first announced, I was like, I can see the benefits of it. I thought it would be a way to get through stuff safely, but it's wide open to abuse. Like, we don't need the government knowing all that information about you. Like, you don't need the government knowing every shop you go in. Like, it's just not needed. But, like I said, I can understand it for safety reasons. So I'm like, I just don't trust this government to do the right thing with that information, though. There's my issue.
Makes sense. And what about you, Lambs?
Yeah, I mean, to echo that, I pretty much agree. It's how much information is too much information, especially given what we already know about the government, given how many times we know that they've openly, lied to us, broken our trust, so many things as well. And even so, once you give them all that information, are you even guaranteed to get where you want to, if you have this reservation here, if you have this appointment here, does that necessarily mean that you have that priority just because you booked that slot? Somebody else may be favored over you, or they may be prioritized over you, because of how much information they know about you. And they're thinking, I prefer this person to actually have this appointment because, I don't know, maybe given their occupational background or social class, I might be more likely to get, say, a higher tip or something like that. So it almost comes back down to what's best for them and their business, and as a result, people will be left out in the cold according to who you are. And I guess that's because of how much information you are giving people about yourselves. And like Mike said, we know the government to abuse information, and the more information you give, the more vulnerable you are, essentially.
No, yeah, I totally agree. It is one of those things where it's like, because we don't have trust in the government as it stands, because it's not just like, in general, conspiracy theorists and people who, are anarchists or anything like that generally don't have a trust of any government and wouldn't want to share any information with any government. But I think that, and I don't mean to call conspiracy theories the opposite, conspiracy theorists the opposite of sane, but I feel like sane, everyday people have been given every reason to not trust this government. And so I think it's very fair for people to be questioning the use of something that is going to take yet more information. But I do also feel like on the other side of that, we're already giving up information willingly that they have access to. They know what shops we're going into already because we always pay by card. When's the last time you had cash, right? We always have contactless. We always have our location services on, particularly for Google Maps to get around. So pretty much. Exactly. CCTV absolutely everywhere, especially in cities like London and Manchester. So I think it's a little bit redundant to say that you don't want the government to have access to where you're going to be all the time, because they could if they wanted to, because it's willingly shared out there. But what is interesting is this particular government, with all the corruption that's been going on, and you'll of course get into a bit of that later on, they sell our information to people that don't have our best interests at heart. And I think that's probably going to be the most concerning thing in terms of knowing where we are all the time. I don't mind Tories or whoever, the government knowing where I am all the time. I do mind, however, a corporation knowing exactly where I am all the time, exactly what I buy, exactly what I need, exactly the places I visit, so that they can continue to advertise to me. I also mind the potential of criminals knowing exactly where I am all of the time. I very much mind, people with bad intentions, aside from making money from selling me things like targeted ads and that kind of stuff. Aside from that, I mean genuine friggin' hackers, people that tried to hack into the NHS not so long ago and succeeded in some respect. So I think it is that type of, like, you want to be a bit more careful. It is something that's a bit scary, having the idea of vaccine passports. Now, this is different than not being able to travel to certain countries without the COVID vaccine. I saw a lot of people on Twitter especially complaining about that. Just to be clear, you have to do that now anyway with several places for different things. There are several places you cannot go to without having things like yellow fever, malaria, these types of vaccinations. So that's a weird thing to complain about. I think they
already need to have an EU-wide or just international-wide green digital type of certification, or like a COVID-proof certification or abroad. So that's a little bit different from vaccine passports. I think vaccine passports are more kind of like UK based. Again,
exactly.
It's a certain events, theatres,
right. So it's different.
Yes, it's different.
Yeah, it's different to international travel, and the requirement of certain vaccines to go to certain countries. So just to be clear, Business Insider have basically put out an article that kind of details this a little bit better. The main bullet points are: vaccine passports are set to become a part of daily life, across much of the world. So it's not just here. Israel have actually already been having this system live of COVID vaccine passports. So a lot of countries are looking to them to be the example, effectively, of how it could work and impact their own countries. So restaurants, gyms, sports stadiums, and other venues could require digital documents as proof a person has been vaccinated. I know very early on in this pandemic, TripAdvisor already were pretty much out there saying, look, once there was any mention of vaccines, TripAdvisor were like, once we're open again, you can't be coming to our events without having a proof of a vaccine. So I think that's something that was already in discussion anyway before the passport talk. As I said, Israel has rolled out a vaccine passport scheme and other countries are close behind. Here's how the schemes work. So this is more of an example of how it would work in the US. So I'm not really going to read the details of that. But what is interesting is that Israel, which we'll all be modeling ourselves over or from, they said they've started issuing so-called green passes on the 21st of February to people who had received the second dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. Under the scheme designed to ease the country out of lockdown, Israelis issued their ID or passport number, date of birth, and approval for their healthcare provider to verify that the person had received the vaccine. So what it looks like is this digital document that will be tied to your medical record, and there would be similar to like a payment gateway, like a payment portal. When you're on a site, you enter your card details. It's not that the card details are going to the seller. It's that the payment provider who's already in the system as part of the shop or whatever will be able to verify that those details are correct and that you have the money in your account. That's why it doesn't then bounce back. So I think it'd be pretty similar to that, where there will be a portal or some kind of gateway where it would link to your medical history so that it can confirm that you have been vaccinated. And that's where I think that's what worries me a little bit, because then I always think about hackers. I think I watch too many these types of films. So I'm just like, yeah, but then what else can you get from my medical file if you can hack into the system, right? What else can you find out about me?
Yeah. I think we have an issue as well, because I'm pretty sure Israel have national IDs. So to say that you're a citizen, we don't have that in our country. So there's another issue within that. And having to require another ID is also going to cause issues for people at the lower end and marginalised parts of society. That was the part what turned me off. Like, if you're going to do this, it's all right, it's all fair, but it shouldn't be at the cost of the person. And it will be at the cost of the person, because this is the way this government runs. Like, you're charged for every form of ID. You have to have the access to the internet, basically, because half of the libraries have started to open up again, but it's still harder to get online for certain people if you've just not got the money. And then to actually pay for that,
And also things are always linked to biometrics now, aren't they? So like your passport's linked to your biometrics, everything has got biometrics, which stands to reason that your ID, if they did then try to bring that back, because they did try for a bit, it just didn't really, the system didn't really, it wasn't a thing. But, you know, if you do then have IDs to justify the COVID vaccine passports, then you have more biometrics in the system, lots of stuff tied in together to really say, I know exactly where this person was at exactly what time. These are their fingerprints. This is their medical history. This is everything about them. Which is, a little bit more worrying than knowing where my phone is, right? A little bit more worrying than my location services being on. That's a bit more information. I just want to quickly get to the comments real quick because I'm so sorry if I pronounce this wrong, but Gayan Oates says vaccine passports can be stopped. All the people have to do is not comply, which is true, because you don't have to get the vaccine. You can't force people to be injected, 100%. The real question is, what if people don't comply? What happens to them? And I think that that's what's the concerning thing, is that, yes, it's sold as an optional thing. It's sold as a non-mandatory thing. But if you're then penalized for not having it, you can't go to certain restaurants. You can't go to certain gyms. And usually with these
start certain jobs, so you're not prioritized as well, because then you're considered a risk. So it's kind of like, okay, yes, you cannot comply, but at the end of the day, they're doing everything they can in their power to ensure that to make your life more difficult, because you're not going to be you're not going to have certain opportunities that other people who have vaccinated and complied with the government's rules and regulations, because they're like, oh, they were good, they listened to us, so we're going to give them what they want. If they want to get back into the job market, hey, they have priority. If they want to book this table at this restaurant, they have that priority. If they want to get into this festival, this ticket, they have that priority, and so on and so forth, because they've complied in their eyes. Because you have your concerns, your reservations, and you've chosen not to comply, and rightly so, because it's right to question this government, especially this government. Reckless mistakes, we already know, have caused thousands of unnecessary deaths, and that's by this government. So, but then again, if you don't comply, they're going to do everything they can in their power to make your life difficult, so that you're going to be forced into a position where you're thinking, oh crap, I've got no choice but to comply, because I'm not going to be able to get a job, my income's getting stopped, it's affecting my life, my family, do you know what I mean? I need to pay rent, bills, etc. So essentially, this is why people just essentially surrender, because they're just thinking they have too much power, and they often feel like there's too few of us, or there's too few of us willing to stand together enough to cause a ripple to have an effect. So
it's about avoiding that two-tier system, which this will enforce. Like, it'll be very much us versus them mentality, the haves versus the have-nots, the upper class to upper middle class to the bottom of the working class. Again, like, it's them who are going to suffer the most from this if it's pushed through. And like I said, I understand that there is a safety aspect involved, but I do not trust this government, and I do not want the working class to suffer even more at the hands of this government.
That's it, isn't it? Because I feel like I would be a lot more at ease with it all if it wasn't the Tories doing this. And I know I sound like a broken record. I know I wear the jewelry that says fuck the Tories. I say it all the time. I tweet it probably every day. Like, I know, but there's a reason for that, because it is a situation where you understand there's a safety aspect. You want to keep people safe. You want people to get back to whatever normal looks like in this new world that we're going into. You want businesses to thrive. Small businesses a lot of them only just opened back up this week. It's been mayhem, right? And I get it, but I just don't want this government to be in charge of doing it, because there's always a motive. There's always something that they're doing behind the scenes or out in the open these days, to be honest. They don't even care. There's no accountability. So they just do it in your face and be like, and what are you actually going to do about it? But I just wanted to get to the point real quick that I put up on the screen. About sheep. So Canna Devil says, Gayan, that's what needs to happen, but there's too many sheep who blindly follow anything the government says. I think there is an element of truth to that. There's a lot of sheep, there's a lot of people that follow, which is why I always say that the leaders are always the ones that should be held accountable more than anybody else. Yes, there should be individual responsibility, but if the leaders aren't doing the right thing, there are always going to be more followers than leaders. That's how human nature is set up, right? That's how nature in general is set up if we look at the animal kingdom. So for me, that's why it's so important to hold leaders accountable, because when you let them them run rife, when you let them run rampant and do whatever the hell they want, you end up with followers following along and not realizing that they're following themselves off the edge of a cliff, right? And they're just going, they're just, that's it, to their own detriment. But I do also want to point out that yes, there's the people that blindly follow, but there's people that follow out of no other choice. Like you guys mentioned, if you're being penalized in your daily life because you've decided not to go for this vaccine, you're trying to, think for yourself, whatever it is you want to call it. If you're being penalized, that's going to affect you. Even if you just look at the leisure side of things, this past year and a month of basically being on lockdown perpetually in this country, how much have you missed leisure activities? It's a real thing to miss out on leisure. You might not have thought about it as seriously before, maybe, especially if you're an introvert by nature. But look what this pandemic has been like, right? Not being able to go meet up with friends, not being able, look how everyone went mad this week. The beer gardens have been absolutely packed every day. I'm sure people didn't even go into work.
Still are today, trust me.
I'm telling you, they're just like, they don't care. They're like, and give me the virus. I don't care. I'm seeing humans, right? So leisure is important, and punishing people by removing their ability to partake in leisure activities, like going to restaurants, like going to clubs, bars, like going to events, festivals, and all that type of stuff, that is going to have an impact on people. And like you mentioned as well, Mike, actually, and Lambs as well, with the jobs, like if certain jobs require you to have a vaccine, if certain places of employment, that maybe even if you're not going to an office, they require you to have a vaccine passport for whatever reason. If you travel, let's say, around the country to meet clients, even if you're not office based, they might say to you, no, you need a vaccine passport, because otherwise you're not going to get in any of these doors. That's another requirement as well, right? That's another thing that's being pushed on people. It reminds me very much of a lot of places in the US. I don't think it happens much here, although it might be starting now. In the US, a lot of people have to go through credit checks just to get a job a lot of the time. A lot of jobs require credit checks in addition to things like drug testing, etc. Here in this country is the same as well. A lot of the time now, if you want to rent somewhere, a lot of the time you will have to have a credit check. So these type of background checks are very commonplace, and it's very easy to add this as just another thing. So that can end up affecting you a lot if you decide not to get the vaccine. But the reason as we've all mentioned on this panel, the reason we are having a hard time with this is because it's being done by the Tories. And you know why? Because the Tories are corrupt, okay? It's not just about me not liking them. There are so many examples. I'll give you 2 more today. So, example number 1. Lord, Matt Hancock owns shares in NHS-approved firm. So the health secretary, Matt Hancock, the guy that's supposed to be looking after all of our health? Yeah, that guy. So he owns shares in a company which was approved as a potential supplier for NHS trusts. In England, it has emerged. This was being reported by BBC earlier this week. Yesterday, actually. So in March, he declared that he'd acquired more than 15% of a company called Topwood Limited, which was granted the approved status in 2019. The firm, which specializes in secure storage, shredding and scanning of documents, also won £300,000 of business from NHS Wales this year. I feel like it's very, very important that when we're using this type of language, we actually explain what it means. So winning £300,000 from the NHS Wales actually means being given a contract and £300,000. That £300,000 is actually taxpayer money because the NHS is taxpayer funded. So £300,000 of the money that we paid was given to a company that is also in part owned by Matt Hancock, the health secretary.
And his sister is a director. And he didn't, I believe he didn't declare it as well. Joe, when you're actually running, you have to declare all your business interests and stuff like that, and he's not declared it. It's beyond the point of cronyism. Cronyism is a made-up word just to cover up what it actually is. If this was anywhere else in Europe, what do you think will be happening?
I'll go one further. If it was a different party, what do you think would be happening? Spin this around, and Jeremy Corbyn had the same shares in the same company that won the same contract for the same amount.
They would
tear him down. He'd be in jail today.
Facts.
Yeah.
Facts. Because never ever stop bringing it up. It would literally bam in your face in the news. Tories, they'll stand up in Parliament, bring it up every single time. It will never end, and they will literally blame the failure or breakdowns in the structure of the running the country on this, on them, on this particular issue, because of that. And it's actually ridiculous. And essentially, what is basically happening, and again, there was an article in it was a Guardian, basically, of the Tories and their corruption and all of this about Matt Hancock's shares and stuff, and Boris Johnson and the Tory government basically using this COVID crisis, the fact that people are in lockdown and we're restricted, and the introduction of these vaccine passports, these new restrictions and rules and regulations, to essentially sell off the NHS, to privatise it off. And by the time everything gets back to normal, the damage is done. There's nothing anybody can do about it, no matter how many protests we organise or set up. So it doesn't surprise me in the slightest.
At all. And it's distraction after distraction after distraction. And then when the smoke clears, the haze clears, you look around and you go, oh shit, that NHS that we keep like bragging about on Twitter whenever we see Americans having to pay 600 grand for an ambulance ride, we're like, whoa, hold on, mate, you should live here. The NHS is amazing. We'll wake up one day and we'll be like, where is it gone? Where is it? Because now we're going to have to be in the same position as those Americans that we see constantly, jokes aside, that we see who have had to get in so much debt for the most simple procedures or the simple checkups. People don't even go to the doctors whether they feel ill or not. They don't even go for checkups because they're like, I'm not paying that. I haven't got the money for it. People selling their houses, like people just not being able to afford treatment for cancers, for even things that are very, very easy to treat. They then become something so much more serious. And unfortunately, a lot of people end up losing their lives.
Women out there need to be sitting there thinking, do I want to have a kid right now? Because them hospital bills, damn, I should look into home birth because it's
right. And it's that kind of insanity that we're opening ourselves up to if we continue to just sit back and let the Tories do exactly what it is they've been trying to do from day one, sell off bits for the NHS with the highest bidder, and most likely the highest bidder, they'll have shares in those companies as well. Just to get on to my second example for the day for Tory corruption, I could go on. We could have several hours of these. These aren't isolated incidents in any shape or form. Tory MPs, this is always down to money, again, because, they love a bit of cash. Tory MPs claim almost £3 million in housing rent on expenses. So Tory MPs are putting their rent payments worth tens of thousands of pounds on taxpayer-funded expenses while cutting housing benefit for the poorest tenants. That's always been my favourite thing about the Tories. When I say favourite, I mean the thing I hate them the most for. It's like, you don't just steal from us. You steal from us and then tell us, you're poor. Like, you're poor, you don't deserve anything. Even if you've paid taxes before, you don't deserve any of that. You don't deserve any kind of blanket to support you if you come on, if there's certain hard times, if you come across hard times or something goes wrong, you don't deserve any of that. You're poor. While they steal from you, they do this. That's the craziest part of it for me. Anyway, sorry. As this is a story in The Guardian put out last Sunday. So apparently between April and November 2020, so right in the middle of the pandemic, when, landlords were kicking people out, when it was all mental, even though we were all like at home and struggling and worldwide pandemic. So between April and November, the most recent month for which figures have just been published, Conservative MPs claimed almost £3 million in housing rent on expenses. The Observer has identified 42 Conservative MPs who claim their own rent on expenses, while at the same time renting out other residential properties for at least £10,000 a year in income. Among them are, and then it names them and does all of this. I'll put this in the description. It should already be there now, actually. If you want to have a look at the names, you can see how much they claimed for, how long it went on for, and you can see their full names. And you can see if maybe they represent your constituency, and you can see if maybe you want to consider not voting for them or doing everything that you can to stop other people in your constituency voting for them as well.
I would add on that point, you can also just go and simply look up how to recall an MP. If you're not happy, you can set up a very, very simple form and you can try and lobby to get your MP recalled if they have committed gross misconduct, which, let's face it, a lot of them probably have. It's there, it should be used more. people are scared to do
just to
it.
be clear as well, in case you missed that, because I might have been reading fast, they were claiming their rent as expenses, so our money, but they were also renting out properties that they own, so they were still getting an income. So they were getting their regular income to be an MP, right? The expenses on top of that, the expenses for rent on top of that, and the income they get from however many residential properties they actually own in the country and rent out to other people.
So essentially, guys, they're living rent-free and they're making money on top of it from multiple income streams.
It's almost like landlordism shouldn't be allowed. Like, genuinely, like, honestly to God, that can't happen if it can't be open to abuse. It's wild. Like, how anyone can say I should be able to demand a big chunk of your wage because I'm rich enough to own the house that you need to live in because you cannot afford a mortgage. But if you're a Tory MP or any MP, you can do that type of thing because you've got the money to back it.
It's all wild. It's all very, very wild. It's disgusting because I feel like a lot of the time when, and this includes, you know, people that have also immigrated here, we have this thing in Britain where we feel like at least it's not like country X, right? We always say at least, you know, at least you can complain, at least it's not that bad. If you look at what these Tories are doing right now, and like Mike rightly said, what MPs in general, party irrespective, are doing right now, it is criminal, as Gayan said. It is criminal what they're doing. Height of corruption. Cronyism isn't a real thing. It's a made-up word that you don't have to say corruption. It is corruption at its finest. But because we are somewhat more comfortable in this country before the pandemic than other countries, that's why we always were made to feel like at least it's not as bad as country X, because we ourselves were doing okay individually.
Also, just the kind of cut in on that point, basically it kind of almost piggybacks off the previous point where you said like about the institutional like gaslighting, like the gaslighting is insane, and in that sense they're basically trying to tell you, oh hey, it's your fault, but it's your fault you're in this situation, basically.
Yeah, they always tell you to work hard, don't they? Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. They always tell you to work hard, as if we're not the ones working hard. You guys are the ones that are not working hard. MPs work for 26 and a half days a year. That's how many times they have to appear in Parliament. And with the pandemic, even less. And we had to pay for them to get new laptops and all this type of stuff so that they could join virtually. That's what we're living in right now. They tell us to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, to work harder in order to get what they get. But they didn't work hard to get what they got. They stole to get it. They were born into it. It's not the same. It's a lie.
Okay, wait, hold on. The example came back to me. So it's basically like being in the school playground, right? Your mum gives you £5 for your lunch money. That's going to be your lunch money for the day, right? You go into school, the bigger kid bullies you, takes your lunch money, right? You don't eat lunch that day, and then that kid goes, ha ha, look how poor you are, can't even afford to eat, ha ha ha.
Yes.
But it's like, well, of course I can't afford to eat because you took my money from me, so how am I going to pay for my lunch with the air? And it's essentially the same principle.
Except the bully would then turn around to you when you say, rightly so, well, of course I don't have money to eat. You took the only £5 I have. They go, well, your parents should have given you 10. Your parents should work harder. Why didn't they give you 10? Even if my parents did give me 10, you would have took the 10. Are you telling me if I had a tenner and you're a bully, you would have given me a £5 change from stealing from me? Is that what you're actually saying?
Yeah, he's just like, Thanos, I'll only take 50% of your shit. Like, no, it doesn't happen like that. Yeah, I'm going to take all your shit. Like, stop being stupid. Like, Oh God, they're infuriating.
It's horrible.
I've just seen a comment 2 seconds ago. It's like, if we could abolish the two-party system, fully agreed with it. Try and vote independent if you can. That's all I'm saying. Like, it's the only way you're going to get notices out there is if in elections like this, which aren't going to cost anything to your party. Let's face it, the Labour would never going to win.
That's true. I think this is the right time to do it. It's always been a risk before because Labour has always had a chance. Right now, Labour still doesn't have a chance, not with Starmer anyway, bloody Tory. Yeah. So, I think now is probably the best time to try independent. Look for whoever else is available right now.
Look for people who actually show the same values as you do as a person. Look past party and look for that policy, what you actually truly believe in, and then you can actually hopefully see some types of grassroots movement around that type of policy, and that's how politics will change. It's strange but true.
Yeah. And if you're just listening to this later on and not watching it, Vicky C, hi Vicky, said whoever is giving you guys a thumbs down needs to give their head a wobble. It was probably a Tory, Vicky, so I'm gonna just not take it personally.
I'm actually gonna say whoever that was is definitely a Tory.
Definitely a Tory. I'm not taking them seriously at all, so it's fine. So all right. So we were on housing, yeah. So speaking of housing. Another link that is in the description is a link to a report. So the Housing Ombudsman has launched an investigation following the report by Daniel Hewitt, who is a reporter for ITV News. And this report that he did uncovered widespread damp and mold in social housing. So I really would urge you guys to click the link in the description box and have a look at that report. It was horrifying, to be honest, the conditions that these people were living in. And it kind of goes back, it kind of makes the corruption sting even that much more, because it's like, you guys were out here, during the pandemic and stealing money from us and taking money that could have been used to help people in social housing, for example. But you were claiming it on your expenses instead, so that you could live rent free and still get income from houses that you owned. You could have just lived in the houses that you owned. You could have just done that. But no, you wanted to live somewhere rent free and still get rent income. While people with certain conditions like cancers, people who are out of work, people are already in destitute situations, living in social housing, hit by a pandemic, and that's what makes it also sad. Like, jokes aside, I'm always like, joking in some way, because I'm trying to not get upset, because it is horrible what they actually do. The real life effects of the games that these politicians play is truly horrifying. And nobody deserves to go through that at all. And I just want, for once, for there to be some kind of accountability for these people. I really do. Just once, like in the movies, how somehow it always works out in the end. I just for once, I want someone to be held accountable for this mess. It could just be Matt Hancock. Like, forget everyone else. Just the one guy. That would make me feel like there's a tiny bit of something there. There's a tiny bit of karma, or whatever you want to call it. Should we move on to drugs? I feel like I need drugs. Should we move on to drugs?
Yeah, let's do it.
So, if re-elected, Sadiq Khan, the current Labour mayor of London, pledges to establish a London Drugs Commission. So this commission would be made up of independent experts to examine the latest evidence from around the world. They'll be looking at, initially, from what I can see, the reform of cannabis legislation in this country. Did you guys see about this? Have you read this anywhere? What do you think? Would you like to see weed be legal in the UK?
I would like to see most drugs decriminalised, to be honest. I think decriminalisation and the treatment of drug addictions and drug issues is not the criminal way. It's been proven, I think, quite well in Portugal, and it's going on in Oregon. I want to say Portland. Like, if they're seeing a drop in crime, I think that's the big one. What to get Tories on board with. If you can say, look, our crime numbers have dropped drastically, How are you not going to see the benefit of that, and how much money they can make from it? It's because the amount of people what they spend on alcohol issues, but I'm not going to approach marijuana because it's a bad drug because it makes you out of your head. Come on, but you're all right with booze? Crazy.
Which actually causes liver cirrhosis, like horrible, like jaundice, other alcohol-related disorders of the liver. In some cases, some types of blood cancer. It's actually so harmful. And like for me, somebody I've got a degree in biomedical sciences. I've got a master's degree in like pharmacology, like drug discovery and stuff like that. So I know I've read like papers about the medical benefits of marijuana, and obviously the consequences, the severe consequences of alcohol ingestions and alcoholism and chronic alcoholism over a long period of time as well. So it's actually mind blowing when you think about it. Having a commission as well where they can control the production of these strains of marijuana as well, ensure that the impurities are removed as well, which is, I guess, what people are probably concerned about. If anything, this would be like properly controlled from start to finish. So what kind of products you're going to get. It's going to be approved before it reaches the consumer, and the economic benefits that come with it as well. And now we're looking at, we're coming out of a really difficult pandemic, which has left a lot of damage economically to not just our country, many countries around the world. So literally echoing what Mike said, it's mind blowing how some people will be literally, like you said, everything's opened up this week, be so quick to get the booze down them, knowing that's even more harmful to you, and people thinking, oh, marijuana, it's absolutely terrible, when if you actually do your homework and don't just believe and listen to everything the media and this government want you to believe, because again, suits their narrative and their agenda, then you actually know it's much more beneficial to you than alcohol. Like, you can die from alcohol ingestion, you can't die from smoking weed. If you smoke too much weed, you'll probably just fall asleep and pass out, and then you'll wake up the next day, nothing happens, because your body will just kind of know you're getting to a limit, and that's it, you'll just fall asleep. But with alcohol, the long-term effects is, well,
I think it's just, for me, it's always been a case of one thing I noticed as I grew older is that everything that I thought or was taught was for my benefit, my health, and all this kind of stuff was always bullshit. It was always about money at the end of it. So how could they make money from a decision to do something or not do something, right? So I always look at, in history, when you had like the prohibition with alcohol in the States, there was lots of different times in our lives, or in the history of our countries, that certain things were implemented or taken away or just never introduced. And when you always look at the root of it, it's always money. So I genuinely believe as soon as the UK government figures out how it can make a lot of money from the legalization and the decriminalization of marijuana or cannabis, they will do it. As soon as they can figure out how they can make money and cut other people out, they will do it. It's never going to be about our health. They'll say that, but it's never going to be about our health. If it was ever about our health, as it's been said in the comments several times, and by you guys, cigarettes wouldn't be legal, alcohol wouldn't be legal, sugar wouldn't be legal, adding sugar to things wouldn't be legal, a lot of E-numbers wouldn't be legal, a lot of other types of sweeteners, MSG, caffeine probably wouldn't be legal. Taurine, the stuff that's also added to energy drinks, wouldn't be legal. There's a lot of stuff that wouldn't be legal if it was our health that the government cared about. It's not. It's about how much money can they and their friends make, right? So as soon as they figure that out, I think some of the barriers that have come before in terms of weed legalization anyway, I'm not sure about other drugs, but it's because with the weed aspect of it, I think the stigma went a long time ago for weed, especially once the US were, pretty much just legalizing it left, right, and center. I think it wasn't about the stigma anymore as it is with other hard drugs. with weed, I think we're such a small country. I think there's a lot less control for the government to be able to control things like dispensaries and stuff, and to keep the money within a certain few. I think genuinely that's a problem. I'm speculating. I don't have an insider in any way, shape, or form, so I'm not going to claim to know what's in their mind. That's just what I believe, and that's just based on the fact that there are so many different ways to get weed in and to grow it yourself and to distribute it, that I think that they understand that too many people that aren't them and their people would profit. And until they can figure out that balance, I don't see legalization happening until that point. The second point I wanted to make is that if we do want to talk about health, as well as, as everyone else has mentioned already, you can die from alcohol, you can die from a lot of things that are very happily legal and available over the counter and via prescription, but you cannot die from cannabis. That's not to say that everyone should smoke or ingest cannabis. It is not going to agree with everybody. That's life. That's everything on this planet, right? There are certain things that just aren't going to agree with you. Is it going to kill you? No. Is it going to have the same damaging effects on your body as with alcohol, for example? Absolutely not. Is it going to be as harmful for your lungs as cigarettes? No. Inhaling any type of smoke is harmful for your lungs, so it does have that element of harm if you are smoking it, but nothing compared to tobacco. So I think that if we are going to have conversations about health, let's have conversations about health, and let's not criminalize everything. There've been a lot of articles recently, looking at microdosing psilocybin. I can't pronounce that word, but magic mushrooms. Psilocybin, I think is how you say it. Yeah. The thing in magic mushrooms that makes you all high and whatever. But looking at microdosing that and its usefulness in being an all-natural antidepressant, so that you're not having to rely on currently medically prescribed antidepressants, which, by the way, side effects can include suicidal thoughts. If you're already depressed, you're taking something to not make you depressed anymore. This thing can also have a side effect of making you depressed and suicidal.
Yeah.
So I think if we're having conversations about health and addiction, criminalizing any part of that isn't going to address the problem, like you said, Mike. If we want to have discussions about health, we should have real discussions like they did in Portugal, like they did in the state of Oregon, as you mentioned as well, where they looked at the effects of addiction, they looked at the effects of very many drugs on people and communities, and they decided that criminalizing it was never going to resolve certain issues like addiction. And it's always going to come down to money. I genuinely believe as soon as they can figure out how to make money from it, it will be legal. And it won't matter what anyone says. It will be legal.
I know I just got a message pop up from Lambs. I think she's going to have to go because she's got another stream, but she's just left us, but I'm not sure. So if she'll be back or not. Okay.
Let me just remove her from the screen and then can always introduce her back. Oh, our background says sports. This is not a sports show, damn it. We are not a sports show. All right, so yeah, that's the drugs, and then the last point in the hot topics segment, Mike. Have you seen all the unrest that's been over in Northern Ireland, particularly over the border? A lot of loyalist riots. What have been your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are this is literally down to the DUP. This is solely on the DUP. They could have voted for Theresa May's Brexit plan, which would have stopped this issue. They personally wanted that hard issue because they wanted to get in bed with Boris Johnson's Tory government. Mm-hmm. This is solely, and I mean solely, down on them. It's wild to think like it could have been avoided by them taking a lesser version of Toryism, like, but they wanted to go whole hog populism, like not understanding. I don't understand how they didn't understand what was going to happen at that cost.
I think they probably did. They probably just didn't realize that it would be as deep as it is. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like they knew that people would be affected, but maybe they had hoped that we wouldn't have this much time on our hands to really be paying attention, I guess. I think that's probably what's happened a lot recently, is people have been paying attention to a lot more stuff that maybe they were distracted with real life before.
Maybe over here, but I don't think that was ever going to be the case in Ireland.
Mm.
I mean, the Good Friday Agreement, I mean, can you remember what they had to go through to get to that? no one in their right minds wants to slide back to what it was like before that.
No.
Like, either side of that border, it can't be wanted. Like, it's
Do you see a way of
self-serving politicians? That's all it is. It's self-serving politicians.
There's a theme here. There's a running theme, if you notice, Mike.
Yeah, just a little bit. Like,
Just a bit. Do you reckon there's any way of like, what do you see as a resolution to what's happening right now? What do you see as a way out of this?
personally, I don't know the ins and outs of any, and I wouldn't imagine that I could even get close to giving you a good response to that. Again, it's one of the harder things that our government will ever deal with, because it was even harder back in the day.
Yeah.
And it's getting perilously close to going back that way. And there's a lot more intelligent people will struggle to answer that than me. Like, I honestly not got a clue.
It's a mad one. That I feel the same way, Mike, to be honest, because it's one of those things where it's like, oh, man, this is like, these are some of the toughest times that we're having to go through, right? Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland. Also, you know, the pandemic, everything that's going on here. There's a lot of really, really serious, challenging issues that are affecting all of us. And we had to have this government in charge at this time. Like, this is there's no time to have this type of government, really. But right now is probably the worst time to have Boris Johnson and co running the show right now. Honestly.
When there's a sheer lack of shame within politics, and a lack of journalists, like proper journalists, like it's just people propping up. No one going to find real answers at the bottom of stuff, because they'll get piled on. Everything is very, very, I am either for or against this government. No, this is what's happened, and here's what we've found. It's very hard to find a balanced form of journalism anymore.
Well, a lot of them seem to be scared to lose access. That's what's been happening with the royal family commentators, right? Is they don't want to lose access, so they just print things that are in their favor, publish things that are in their favor, that's, you know, show them in a good light. And if there is a story, they won't chase it. And I think that's our whole government has turned into. Our whole British press has turned into the royal family correspondence.
Yeah,
they're
I can
doing
see
the
that.
exact same thing.
Yeah. If it's not, it's a slightly different take, but oh god, how can I put this into words? If it's not them scared of them losing access, it's them scared of the so-called cancel culture. Like, they can't move because of lack of laws around journalism. I think is the bigger issue, because people can just say opinion, and that gets construed as journalism. It's not the same, and until that is closed off, I don't think much is going to change. But while it's working in their favor, why would they change it?
No, they have no incentive to change it at all.
No,
none at all. Well, with that in mind, we'll move on to the next segment, which is to keep an eye on upcoming May elections. Please, if you are not registered to vote, and you should know if you're registered to vote, because you should have received a poll card in the post. And if you haven't, most likely you are not registered to vote. So please, please, please go in the description right now, click the link next to the bit that says, I think you should just say register to vote. Click on there. It takes not even 5 minutes. Please, 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 please make sure you are registered to vote. The deadline is Monday, this Monday, the 19th of April. That is the deadline to register if you want to participate in the upcoming May elections. So that's the first thing I want to get mentioning, is that you need to make sure you are registered to vote before Monday. So just do it now, get everything done with. If you want to know what the elections are for, what's coming up, what decisions you're going to make. Firstly, the actual day of the election is the 6th of May, but you can vote by post ahead of time, and obviously it needs to arrive before that. I also got something in the mail the other day. I'd already had my poll card, but I also got something that confirmed that my local polling station has changed. So it might be the same in your area, because I think it was COVID related. It was to do with social distancing, I think. So mine is now a little bit further away. So please do keep an eye out for any notices that might have come. I think it came in like a proper letter form. It came from the council. Yeah, so it wasn't like a poll card. It was actually an envelope, like proper letter. Confirming that my polling station had changed. So please make sure you are aware of where your polling station will be. And you can vote by mail, so you don't need to go and actually, queue up if necessary, or go in person. You can vote by mail ahead of time. So there's also a second link in the description box underneath where it tells you to register to vote of what the elections are going to be. It includes local council elections in England. There's mayoral elections as well, police and crime commissioner elections. Those are just as important. You need to, I know we're all about like, yeah, at police, whatever, but you need to make sure that the people in charge of the police, the people that police the police, are the right people, while we still have that structure in place. Abolish the police and all that, but while they're here, let's make sure that we're actually regulating them in some way. There's also some stuff happening in Wales and Scotland with parliamentary elections. So please click on the link to see what's going down on the 6th of May, so that you can get involved and participate. We can moan about society all we like, but if we're not voting, we're not really doing anything about it. So did you want to mention anything about the elections, or are you all right for me to move on to the next one? I
would just say vote policy over party. Find the policy that you actually want, and don't just follow whoever the party your area traditionally votes. Just go and do your research. That's all.
Yes. And if you happen to agree with a policy belonging to the Tory party, then just vote party then. Don't vote policy, because don't vote for them. Please. Like, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I can just beg and hope that you'll do the right thing. All right.
Well, my argument was you don't really see that many great the policies coming out of that party anyway.
Yeah, so. We don't, but people might read certain things and be like, oh yeah, I agree with that. No, don't vote for them. Don't.
Yeah, okay. Okay. My bad.
All right. So one thing I did last week in this segment was I thought it's really, really handy that we always look at our allies, what our allies are doing, because we tend to follow suit if we haven't already kind of set the trend on it. So it's always a good idea to have a look at what the countries around us are doing. Let's start off with New Zealand, because I'm such a fan of Jacinda Ardern. So New Zealand, I got a couple of stories came out of there this week. Over the last couple of weeks, sorry. So New Zealand announced a temporary travel ban on all travellers, including citizens of New Zealand and residents, coming from India after 17 new COVID cases were reported. The ban was announced on the 8th of April and will run from the 11th, so it's already started, up until the 28th of April, and then they said that they would look into it again then. So basically, whether you're a resident or citizen, it didn't matter. You could not come back into New Zealand if you were in India. They were just like, no, ban. Did you hear about this? What do you think about it, Mike?
Wow. I mean, Jesus. I agree with a lot of what New Zealand have done during this pandemic, but wild to say, even though you're from here, you are a citizen, you can't come back. Fuck off. Like, for a couple of weeks, you can just stay over there, even though you might not have anywhere to stay or any money. Like, but you can't come back to your homeland. Wild. Crazy. But I would argue their death rate is a hell of a lot lower than ours.
Man,
and they've been basically
COVID for a while.
Yeah, and basically just running like a normal country.
Man, they had festivals and all sorts over there. Yeah. They've been killing it. So I don't know, maybe that is an extreme thing to read. It's a wild thing to read, but when you think about it, you're like, yeah, but they've really handled it well, to be fair.
Zero COVID was their and Australia's policy, and you've got to argue, has their growth been affected worse than ours? No. Is everyone spending money quite freely because everyone can go into a shop? Yeah. What's the difference? Oh, people can't really come in and out of the country, but everyone just likes spending their own money doing whatever they was doing. Like, I don't see where the issue is there. Like,
It's not a bad little trade, is it? To have your freedom within the country, you just can't be traveling outside the country like that. Well, that's not. We can't travel outside the country right now either. It took a long time, but we now can't just travel we can't go on holidays. It's technically illegal right now. So we're in the same position, except a lot more people had to die before we could get here. So, it is the first time. I do want to make a note. It is the first time that New Zealand has stopped citizens and residents from returning. Jacinda Ardern said, I absolutely understand the difficulty this temporary suspension will cause. I understand that, but I also feel a sense of responsibility and obligation to find ways to reduce risk that travellers are experiencing. And there has been news about this crazy mutation. It's mutated again in India. It's wild at the moment. So it might have been the right call, but time will tell. Yeah. Another thing in New Zealand, so New Zealand becomes the first country ever to require banks, insurers, and investment managers to report the impact of their investments on climate change. So according to AJ Plus, the Minister for Climate Change says this information, particularly on the financial sector's impact, is needed to reach zero carbon emissions by 2050. Did you manage to see a story about this?
I have not, but that is very interesting. Like, shows actual progression, and like we want this to work. We want to get to zero carbon, and the way we can do this is by punishing people what just flutter money on what they know will damage the environment. They will gamble on really, really, really horrible stuff just to make a buck. Should you really be investing in a lot in nickel mines in the middle of really, really, really precious territory for nature? No, you should probably have to pay extra for that.
I agree. I think it's right. It's a real step in. It's a showing real action. It's showing real progression, like you said, because banning straws from bars, right? to show that you are doing something to prevent, climate change and its effects is not really that effective when you have corporations that are causing the majority of the poor effects on our environment. So banning straws doesn't actually do anything. It's not going to impact us. Yes, it's nice to have biodegradable stuff. Of course, it's, helpful in some way. But in the grand scheme of things, if corporations are acting as normal, then we're not going to do anything better. Nothing's going to get better. This is a great way of making sure that you follow the money. Wherever the money is, that's what corporations will do. So if the money is not being invested in things that are going to cause harm in our, to our environment, then they're not going to do those things because it's not going to make them any money. If it's not profitable, they're just not going to do it. They'll go for the profitable thing. And so, yes, I think, like you said, it's a great way of showing progression. It's so great. Monitor where this money is going, how the money is being spent. So great to look at, investment managers as well, to make them responsible. We're putting it on you. You have to manage this money and invest this money responsibly. And if you don't, it's not going to be status quo anymore. It's not going to be a case where you can just chill out anymore. You have to show us receipts, literally show us the receipts of where this money is going. Hold people accountable. That's all we need to do. Power is not a bad thing for people to have. I remember seeing earlier on in the comments, I forget who said it, my apologies, but that, we just need to get rid of political parties in general because anyone that gets into a system of government is going to do the wrong thing because they'll have power, is effectively what they were saying. And it's like, I understand why you think that, but having power isn't a bad thing. It's the misuse and the abuse of power. And the way you get to that is by not being held accountable when you do the wrong thing. And I think that that's where the problem is. So, certain people should have power over many people. There's a reason why these systems have been, put in place, because it's how it helps us to function and thrive as societies in the world, right? By having, whether it's thought leaders whether it's actual like political leaders, where it's leaders in science and technology. Like, you need these leaders in these places to push society forward and to make us our best selves, right? And to have the best impact on people. But if you've got people in these positions of power, which is great power, and they misuse it, they should be taken away immediately. And that tells not only them that they can't get away with it, but anyone else who has the ability to get into that position at some point, they know, oh, I need to be on my best behavior. Otherwise, I'm going to lose that power, money, access, whatever. But we're not doing that. We're just letting people get away with it. And so, of course, they're going to misuse it and abuse it. And now we think that the power itself is the problem. No, it's the lack of accountability that's the issue. So I think, again, great move by New Zealand. Amazing. First country ever, trailblazing. I hope this catches on. I really do.
I would say I hope it does, but with the way the City of London, let's just put it to that, the City of London operate and how they interact with tax havens all over the world, what are under the Commonwealth, just to hide dirty money, it will never happen in this country.
Yeah.
It's
at least not easily.
No. Like it'll cost too many people. It'll cost too many people to face up to their the consequences of their actions, and it just wouldn't happen because white collar crime doesn't really matter in the UK.
No,
if you notice, like it just doesn't matter. Like you can rob to help feed your family, and you'll be hung up to dry in the courts. You can rob millions and millions and millions from banks
just to hoard more wealth. And nothing.
and then to get a slap on the wrist, maybe.
Yeah, it's wild, wild. Well, speaking of an unjust system, I don't want to stay on this too long because this has depressed the hell out of me on social media. A lot of injustice, man. It's like we're getting used to it. It's like we're getting desensitized to a lot of it now. Of course, I'm talking about the US. Of course, I'm talking about police brutality, justice for Daunte Wright, or Dante. I think it's probably Dante, but because of the U, it's throwing me a little bit with our accent. I keep hearing it in an American accent when people talk about him. So the police officer that murdered him, and I'm being very, very specific with the word I'm using. I'm using murder because you shouldn't use murder unless you're talking about the actual crime of murder, which is different from just killing. It's the purposeful killing with the mens rea, the motivation to actually commit murder. To me, this is murder because, as far as everyone has mentioned, as far as everyone has confirmed, Daunte Wright was unarmed. Therefore, if I have a weapon that can kill and I commit the act of killing you by shooting you with this weapon and you pose absolutely no threat to me, and I know that going into it, surely that shows a motivation to commit murder. But, I'm just doing 2 + 2 and equaling 4. That's not how this world works. Kim Potter, that's the name of the police officer that killed him. So she's alleging that she meant to discharge her taser and not her firearm. So taser is on one side, firearm on the other. Still don't even understand why you were trying to discharge your taser in the first place, because again, unarmed, not posing a threat to you, was in a car, literally posing no threat, but whatever, cool. All right, you were trying to go for your taser, not your gun. Well, they're two very different things. They're on different parts of your body, literally the opposite side of your body. And she was been a police officer for 26 years before this. That's longer than Daunte Wright was alive, because he was a 20-year-old boy. And I use boy, again, intentionally and specifically, because 20 years old is not grown. It really isn't. Not to get killed. So I want to just highlight a tweet by Bree Newsom Bass. I follow her. She's fantastic. I highly recommend that you do as well. And she tweeted, if someone has been a police officer for 26 years and can't distinguish a gun from a taser, that's a solid indication, as any, that training will do nothing. And it is time to abolish this relic of slavery. And I 100% agree. It's wild. This woman, Kim Potter, by the way, she was a president of a local police union as well. She'd been admonished by investigators back in 2019 for allegedly attempting to conceal evidence after a police shooting that left a 21-year-old dead. So, you know, patterns, history of behavior, again, goes to show that, was this an accident? Let's put all of that aside and say that it was an accident. Let's put this now in the medical industry, in the medical field. If I'm a nurse and I'm supposed to give the patient saline and I give them epinephrine and it kills them, should I just be able to go, my bad? Is that all right? 26 years I've been a nurse and I do that and I make that mistake and that person dies. Is it all right for me to just be like, my bad? Should that be allowed? Should I be able to just resign and nothing happen? So I'll pass it on to you, because honestly, I'm finding words to not say fuck this woman. That's what I'm trying. Like, I'm just finding other ways to get around it. But basically, fuck this woman.
It's almost as if police, like politicians, should be held to a higher standard because they are in power of people.
Almost
like it's almost like you should have a higher standard to become a police officer. It's like a lot of the time we'll accept what we can, and I think there's a real issue. Yep. You need to be of a certain mind frame to be a really, really, really good police officer, I believe, and I don't think there's many of them about. Namely because you need to have a higher bar to become a police officer, and it's not there.
What's wild to me is that they always say, you know, oh, they call for peace. They need, you know, people always talk in the comments a lot, you know, on social media, talking about how, were you complying? You should keep calm. You should watch your, you know, how you speak to police. You know, you shouldn't be on edge and act on edge because the police are on edge. Well, what's the point of having the police then if everyone's just going to be on edge? Yeah. I can be on edge all by myself. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, if a crime happens, if a crime has been committed in my local area, if everybody is just on edge, there's absolutely no reason for there to be police. Police are supposed to be there they're supposed to have training in order to deal with high stress situations. Humans are humans. We're going to deal with things how we're going to deal with things. But there's a reason why there's certain training that should be there. Yeah. There's a reason why doctors are trained differently, right? When they are surgeons, for example. They need to be calm under pressure so that if something does rupture and there's a whole bunch of blood everywhere, if they're going, oh my God, and freaking out, holding the scalpel in their hand, no, focus on the job. So it's like, why is it different for police? It's almost as if they were never put there to protect us in the first place. They were never put there for our benefit in the first place. And they were actually there for a very, very small number of people in society so that they can keep their wealth. Almost.
It's almost like they're there just to protect property. Just almost like it's the amount of time I believe police spend training compared to on the street. It should be closer to 50-50, if not 60-40 in the weight of training, because people are different from the one person to the next. And if you think everyone should act however that policeman decides that they should act, you're going to be struggling. And you're going to have a lot of dead people.
I mean, you're not wrong. Again, there was also 2 days ago or yesterday. This week is kind of blending into one, but there was the body cam footage.
The 14-year-old child. The 14-year-old child.
Yeah, 13-year-old boy had his hands up. Police shot him. It's just like, oh my God! Like, we're just out here killing. Then we're just out here shooting people, shooting kids, we're shooting anyone. We're just out here. Because then why do we need them? Why do we need police then?
A policeman's reason for firing his weapon shouldn't be I was scared. At any point, literally,
you're in the wrong job, mate.
Yes,
you're in the wrong job. If you are easily nervous, if you are easily anxious, there's nothing wrong with that. That's very, very normal thing to happen to certain types of people. Some people are more high stress than other people. Some people.
I think we might have lost Linda. Hope she comes back.
Oh, I think I'm back. Oh my God, was I frozen?
There you go. Yeah.
I just saw the little buffering thing and I was like, oh no, oh no. No, the point I was trying to make was that if you are a person that does not deal well with pressure, with stress, with a lot going on, a lot of noises, with danger, this is just not the job for you. There are plenty of desk jobs that you can do. There are plenty of jobs that are a lot less stressful. No danger is posed. No danger to your life. No one could run up on you and do anything. Those are the jobs for you. Don't take a job, or forget even don't take a job. Don't hire people that display these qualities. Don't hire people and don't just take their word for it that they're not high stress people either. That's where training comes in, and testing, putting them in these situations, getting psychologists involved to check their mental state, to check their biases, to check all of this stuff. It's important because you have a whole bunch of people out here that owe us the duty of care by law and are just not, they don't give a shit. And then they're jumpy. You're jumpy. I'm jumpy. What the hell? Why are we here then? What are you doing?
So almost again, like they shouldn't really be doing half of the interactions that they do.
It's almost
like it's like the police take on far too much responsibility. Mm-hmm. They shouldn't be covering half of the stuff that they're responding to.
They're responding to mental health issues. They're responding to stuff that they have absolutely no business responding to.
And definitely won't be trained for.
And absolutely not being trained for. No, you're absolutely right. It's mad. And I really just want to make it very, very clear to everybody watching, listening. First of all, thank you. And secondly, this isn't just a US problem. I hate when I see like, man, America's wild. Everywhere's wild. This country is wild too. And I just want to put on the screen, hopefully this works for me, an article. Give me 2 seconds. Let me see if I can get it up. About our beloved Metropolitan Police. Just give me 2 seconds. And I hope now that you can see that. If it's on the screen, I might need to make it bigger. This is the worst image thing. What are you doing? Oh, do you know what? Let me just make it smaller. Okay, so the Met officer, jailed for breaking black man's knee in racial profiling assault. So a Metropolitan Police officer who broke a black father's leg in front of his children has been jailed after the judge in the case said this was a clear case of racial profiling. I just want to be very, very clear on the circumstances of this. So Charlie Harrison, that's the name of the officer, attacked Carl Abrahams as he left a graveyard with his 2 sons. So there's a level of hatred that you need to have to be outside of a cemetery watching a man come out with his kids and in your mind going, I'm going to attack this stranger based on the amount of melanin that his skin produces. Do you know how wild that is? Like, this person just came out of the cemetery with his kids. There wasn't a bar fight. There wasn't words exchanged. There wasn't literally coming out of the cemetery with his kids. So they'd been placing flowers. So his sons, aged 13 and 16, had been placing flowers on their mother's grave in Forest Gate, East London on New Year's Eve in 2018. Harrison, the officer, kicked Abrams in the knee, causing a fracture that left him on crutches for 3 months, a court heard. So, it's these are the people that are, out here in charge of our streets and to protect us and all this kind of stuff, just running up on people outside of graveyards because, that's a thing. So, basically, while we're out here saying bun the Tories, bun the police as well. Let's hold them accountable when they do the wrong thing. Again, they've got power over us. They should be held accountable. We should get the right people in these positions, or get rid of the positions then. If you're not going to do it right, just don't do it then. Let's just not do it. Because if I'm freaked out, you're freaked out, neither one of us needs to be a police officer.
Nah. Like,
neither one of us needs to be paid to do this. Neither one of us should have any kind of weapon.
No.
And just lastly, so there's been a rise of far-right extremism. In case you weren't aware, living under a rock, but particularly in Ukraine. So Ukraine is attracting Americans who want to fight along far-right extremists. There's an article by Christopher Miller for BuzzFeed News that is in the description. Very, very interesting read if you would like to have a look at that. I won't go too much into it, pretty much self-explanatory, but it's super interesting what he uncovered. So if you've got a second after this, check it out. But yeah, I mean, far-right extremism has been going up. Neo-Nazis everywhere. So many people with just crazy ideas, impacting the younger people as well, you know, reaching out to people, especially whenever there are times of difficulty and people going through it. And pandemic is going to have caused a lot more people to be in difficulty. So certainly something to keep an eye on. That's why it's in this segment. Not a surprise, of course, but keep an eye on it. And if you've got kids, watch your kids, man. Watch what your kids are consuming. It's hard, but you need to do it. It's part of parenting these days, man. You got to watch their digital life, see who's influencing them, see what's impacting them, teach them the right things, and protect the younger generation, man. And not just if you're a parent, if you've got younger siblings, cousins, family members, you know, kids of friends, whatever, just look out for them, man, because they are being targeted by these people. And an alarming number of, particularly white, of course, youth are being pulled into these cults, these cult-like organizations, and a lot of far-right shit has been put in their head, and we're trying to get rid of all that if we're going to progress. So look out for the young people in your lives, please, and help protect them from these people.
Yeah, I would add, it's almost like the 1980s again. It's with the way there was a lot around the miners' strikes. There seemed to be a lot of far-right people because of people are just disillusioned in every aspect of life, and that is the same now because of lockdown. If it's not just because you're poor in Northern and there's no jobs about, it's literally that again happening right now.
Yeah.
If people can't see that, it's maybe because we've got a certain type of leader who has quite openly been racist and a misogynist and just a general awful person, and he's done it on print many occasions. And when that type of person gets to the top, it emboldens people. It makes people think, I can do that because the people at the top can do that.
Yeah. You look at how they get, you know, if somebody is doing the wrong thing and they're constantly getting rewarded for it, you start to think, well, I can do the wrong thing too.
Yes.
So yeah, if there's no consequences, this is what happens. If there's no accountability, this is what happens. You let people think that it's okay to be hateful, that it's okay to run up on a stranger coming out of a graveyard with his kids to kick him in the leg because you don't like his skin color. Why is that an issue? Look at who we've got in charge. Why is that an issue? Look at who we're mourning. Look at actual, I'm not even saying his name. I ain't even mentioning it because that's nothing to do with me. And I have nothing nice to say. My mother always told me, I have nothing nice to say. Shut the fuck up. So let's try and get to some good news. Listen, I told the guys before we even went live, it's been a struggle to get to this good news segment because there's not been much out here in the last couple of weeks since episode 2. So episode 2 was great. I had examples of like protests that were successful and the kids doing great things. It was wonderful. This time, not so much. So the first bit I've got is that Judge Peter Cahill. So Peter Cahill is a judge in the Derek Chauvin trial, the officer that murdered George Floyd, again, using the word murder intentionally. So he denied the defense's request to sequester the jury in the trial, which means, for those of you that are not aware, put the jury basically away so they can't have access to people, news, etc., putting them basically in like some kind of hotel, motel, or whatever, away from everyone. The defense wanted the jury isolated over the police shooting of Dante Wright in nearby Brooklyn Center. This all happening around the same area, which is wild, not very far from each other.
15 miles away from each other, I think.
A few miles away from each other. And Dante Wright's mum, I believe, taught George Floyd in school.
Oh.
Wild. So, so the defense wanted the jury isolated over the police shooting of Dante Wright in nearby Brooklyn Center. But Judge Cahill said this is a totally different case, as he denied their request. So I guess, the reasoning behind that is obviously that they wanted to make sure the jury couldn't be biased, by seeing yet another police shooting. But it's like, that's not bias. That's facts. That's what's happening. It's a problem. That's letting them know they need to hold these people accountable. That's not bias.
Yeah. It's look, if we can hide this, it didn't really happen.
It didn't happen.
It literally happens every other day at the moment, it seems.
Constantly. It's as if then the video, which I'm sure would have been in trial, of Derek Chauvin kneeling on George Floyd's neck while he's begging for mercy, it's as if they won't have seen that 8-minute, 40-something second video. It's as if that takes that away. The fact that they've seen a 20-year-old nearby getting shot and dead by the police again. Do you know what I mean? It's like, no, it's not going to be biased. And so that's the little bit of good news that the judge was like, following common sense. And again, I know I'm struggling to find the good news, and I know common sense shouldn't be the good news, but I'll take what I can get in the year of our Lord 2021. And the second story is this one's kind of good news. So Britain recorded its greenest day ever. I had to literally go on positive.news, which is a positive news site. I had to literally Google, can I have something positive, please, for the love of God? So what went right this week? Britain's greenest day ever, plus more positive news. It's actually quite a nice little site, to be honest. They're clutching at straws as well, let's be honest, but it's not bad. So Britain set a green energy record. Bee-friendly face masks launched and seeds were sown for a community farm in Manchester. Plus more stories of progress. So as plants sprung into life across Britain over Easter, the country's burgeoning renewable sector flourished too. On Monday, wind and solar energy supercharged the electricity grid, helping the nation record its greenest ever day. According to the National Grid, wind made up 39% of the energy mix, with solar at 21% and nuclear accounting for 16%. These figures, it said, meant that power plants in England, Scotland and Wales produce just 39 grams of CO2 for every kilowatt hour of electricity. The previous record was 46 grams, set on 24th of May last year. So 24th of May last year, 46 grams down to 39 grams of CO2 this year. A little bit of progress. We're getting a tiny bit greener using a little bit less CO2. That's good news. Happy
days. It's about time. The fact that we're still thinking about building more nuclear power stations is mind-blowing when you can see what we can get from simple wind and solar. And you haven't even put into any hydro. We've got a coastline. A really big coastline, what would be able to generate a hell of a lot of energy. Keep it moving forward now.
Love it. Love to see it. So that's the renewable sector. A bee-friendly face mask, as I mentioned, was launched. Littered face mask blight landscapes and pose a threat to wildlife. They ask Dutch designer Marianne de Groot-Pons, great name, who has invented a biodegradable face mask that leaves bee-friendly flowers behind. Made out of rice paper embedded with seeds, the Marie Bee Bloom is what they're called. Marie Bee Bloom face coverings flourish in a riot of colour as they decompose in the soil. So far, she's produced 20,000 of these masks, which have not yet been tested for efficacy. So we've still got to check it out, but that's what they're intended to do. And then the final bit was the public was invited to buy into a community farm here in Manchester. Anyone can buy shares in the 120-acre kindling farm, which will adopt the practices of agroforestry, which is the growing of both trees and crops on the same land to grow wildlife-friendly fruit, vegetables, cereals, and pulses. campaigners are hoping to raise upwards of 390,000K. So I will put this link in the description box if it is not there already. So please have a look, see if you can get involved in that. That would be great. See if you can support any of these if the environment is important to you, and it should be because you fucking live here. So, you know, if the environment goes to shit, so do we, guys. Spoiler alert.
I really like the idea of the masks. I think it's great. My only issue is around here, if there's any type of like green embankments, they seem to get mowed by the council. So I'm like, I'm all for all the wildflowers, and I wish they'd leave them because, like we said, it's important for the bees. But councils go around mowing them on diesel lawnmowers. Just,
yeah, we've got to work.
It seems a little bit counterintuitive. Like,
yeah, we got to work on that. And that's pretty much it from me, man. Did you have anything you wanted to chat about before we go?
No, I'm happy with that. I think it's a decent episode.
I know, and the two of us held it down for most of it, which I'm pretty excited about. That was good.
Enjoyed it.
I know, it was dope. Well, listen, if you're tuned in, if you're still here live watching, thank you so much. If you are on a part of a rewatch gang watching this later or listening to this later on a streaming service, thank you for tuning in. This is episode 3. Episode 4 will be in 2 weeks' time. So the 1st of May will be a brand new month by then. Tune in then, where hopefully we'll have the lot of the gang back, but at least you know that if the gang aren't here, the two of us can hold it down and have a good convo. If you
want to come get drunk on Friday nights, come over to the Red Line Picture Lives. Linda's usually in the comments. All we do is get drunk as hell and talk about nerdy, geeky stuff. Come and join us. Last night's was a lot of fun. I'm surprised I weren't hungover. I got well too drunk last night.
You were very drunk. You were very drunk. No, that is a good time. I can attest as somebody who watches it every single Friday. Haven't missed one yet. It's a very fun time. They talk about good shows, good movies. They have a drink. You can drink along with them. Cuss them in the comments because that's what I do. And it's a lot of fun. Rightly so, especially because a lot of you cuss me back, which is unexpected. It's a great time. So yeah, Red Line Picture, check them out every single Friday. Of course, the Talk About It Network appears here on Sarcasm City. So we have our special every month at the end of every month to wrap up the month. If you have watched that before, moving forward, because I produce that, so I put the topics together for that one. I'm not going to put anything too serious now because we've got What's Politicking You Off. We get our serious done here every 2 weeks, so I'm going to keep it to the ridiculous for the Tane special. I'm going to keep it to, because we're all drunk on that, right? We're doing shots, we're playing games. I want to keep that going, have a good time, because listen, it's been depressing enough if you've been paying attention. Yes. So if you want to come and check out the Talk About It Network special at the end of the month, please do. You are welcome. Bring a drink or whatever you partake in. But otherwise, we will catch up with you. Oh, Shop Mortality. Shout out Mortality.
I haven't got my shirt on, but yeah, go and buy shit.
Go and buy some stuff from Mortality. And thank you again for tuning in. And we will see you in 2 weeks on the 1st of May. And hopefully we'll be on time at 3 o'clock. Again, bye.
Bye.